How does one improvise? It seems to be up for debate all the time, or kind of up for instruction. Loads of YouTube videos discuss this topic. I don't know which approach will be best for you, but I do know what's worked for me, and I have 8 tips that I'm going to share with you to improve your improvising. And I'll be right back after this intro. Hello and welcome to another video with me, Elmo J. Karjalainen. It's good to have you along. You can call me Elmo or Jay or Karjalainen or this guy or whatever. Today I'm discussing improvising and kind of things I think about when I improvise. Well, actually not think about, try to avoid thinking, but things that worked for me during my development, because I improvise all the time. I almost never write a solo. I prefer to improvise it. It's just much more fun, in my opinion, much fresher for me. Some of these things work for planning out solos as well, but let's just get right into it. This is 8 tips on how to improvise. Maybe I should do this in quote-unquote funny voices. I'll just think I'll do it. Number 1, practice it. Now this might seem bloody obvious, but it ain't. It ain't obvious. You have to practice improvising. For me, what that meant was that I basically sat at home or stood at home during my teenage years, and still do, and I play over backing tracks, over actual, not backing tracks, just actual music, and or even when I don't have any backing music, I can just improvise. And it really helps because, I mean, whatever you do, you have to practice it. You can't just jump straight in and expect it to work. And when you start practicing improvising, don't get discouraged, because odds are it'll suck in the beginning, but slowly but surely you will be able to get there. So practice it, really do practice it. And I think, by the by, for me, practicing improvising has been kind of one of the best things I've done practice-wise ever, because it's allowed me to maintain a level of interest that I might not have otherwise had, especially with exercises and stuff like that. So practice your improvising. I'm improvising dialects and voices here. The voices in my head. Number 2, learn licks. Yes, licks. I like the analogy of kind of language and music. They work in the same way in many ways. And I like to think of licks as phrases in language. So licks expand your musical vocabulary. Okay, now I just noticed that I said vocabulary, which would mean words, but anyway, you get the point. The more you learn different licks and musical phrases, the more you will be able to apply them in your own playing, regardless of if that's planning out a solo or improvising a solo. If you don't learn licks, you will just play scales, basically. Or and this, I don't remember who the jazz guitar player was, but I remember seeing an instructional DVD back in the day. One respected jazz guitar player who said he doesn't believe that there is such a thing as kind of pure improvisation. Everyone has to have something to fall back on, and licks are such a thing. And when you're on a roll, you can play stuff that you've never played before. Most of the time, you're not on that kind of roll, even when you're doing really good. You need licks, you need phrases that you kind of can rely on. This will work over that, and so on. So learn licks. Besides, learning licks also helps with your technique. So yeah, exercises. They help with technique, but they don't help with the musical bit. And that's where licks come in. They can really help with your musical with your musical vocabulary and your overall musicality. Now, if you want a whole bunch of licks, there's a bunch of licks up on my Guitar Academy. There's a link in the description. If you want access, you can also get that through my Patreon. There's a link to that as well in my description. But you can basically find licks anywhere on the intertubes. So that's licks, and then on to number 3, which is scales and modes. So try to learn scales and modes, and don't just stick to your regular old pentatonic, although that's great. Try to learn the major scale and the different modes, and try to learn some other scales as well. Even if you end up never using them, they can give you some interesting ideas. And when I say learn your scales and modes, I also mean don't just learn the regular boxes like you have the C major scale. That thing. Try to learn something apart from just that box and the different boxes, because those are very limiting and they get boring so quickly. Learn them on each separate string in this direction as well, because that will really help you. A lot of guitar players are kind of, and I used to be as well, I think it's a developmental thing. Back when I was in my formative years, I also played the boxes, but at some point I realized I have to do this as well. Now, I know scales and modes are theory, and some people think that's boring, but theory is basically a bit like grammar, again, to use the language analogy. You don't need all the grammar to produce language, but you need to kind of know it on some level, at least implicitly, and you can, of course, just learn it like you learn a language, just by picking up stuff from other people when they play their instruments. But learning scales is a very good idea. The other way is basically to learn or to improvise kind of using chords. But for me, it's been scales and modes. So I have scales and modes covered in my Guitar Academy as well. Again, link in the description. But you get that stuff basically anywhere. So you can check out my Academy if you so want, or my Patreon. Hey, you get all my music on my Patreon as well. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Now what I mean, you get it for free. You don't have to pay if you think it sucks. Okay, so scales and modes. But number 4, certain notes I like. I try to emphasize certain notes. Now we have basically, let's take a C major chord. Basically, if you're playing over a C major chord, you can use any of the notes in the C major chord and feel fairly certain that that note will work over the C major chord. So you can use a C, you can use E, an E, you can use a G. Those will all work, so knowing which notes are in the chord will help. Now, you have to do this by ear, well, I'll get to that in a second. But there are also other things that I find work. For instance, and this is just one example, is the second note of the scale. If let's stick in C major. So the second note of the scale is a D. I can always play a D over a C major. I say always, and of course I'm lying. You can't always play the second note over or you can't always play a D over a C major. If it's C, Phrygian, dominant, then that won't work. But let's not get too technical. The point is, find out which notes you like over which types of things. And I mean, I like a flat 5 occasionally, which can sound really annoying, and I sometimes like to rub people's faces in it. So if we're in, let's say, A minor, it has a dissonance which I like. So you have to find out which ones you like. That's again, that's down to practice. So just play stuff. Try and if you're a shredding type of person, try to play stuff slowly as well and listen to which notes work over what. Number 5, learn not to think. Yes. Now, it's a different thing to think than to listen. Try to listen to what you play, what you play. So try to listen to the notes that come out of the amp, or if you're using an acoustic, yeah, try to listen to the notes and to the background and think about what works. Don't try to think about what would work in advance. If you're constantly thinking about what am I going to do next and what am I going to do next, you will actually you'll just get lost and you'll forget what you're doing. It's kind of concentrating on the wrong thing. For me, I found not thinking about it works better, but kind of maybe you analyze it later on. You can record yourself, but sometimes also just listening to it and intuitively reacting to what it is you're listening to yourself doing. But if you think about it, that can lead to trouble. So try not to think about it at least too much. Number 6. Now I said I know. Now I know I said some things about theory, but this one is don't think about theory. You should know your theory. You should have it in your head and in your heart. You can have it wherever you want to shove that thing called theory, where the sun doesn't shine. I do not care. But you need to know it, but don't think about it. Listen. Music is about listening and about feeling. Then it's about technique. That comes a distant third or something. And then it's about theory. That comes a distant fourth. And maybe I'm forgetting something in between here. But don't think about the theory. I've noticed that every time that I'm in trouble when I'm playing, it's when I actually have to think about the chord changes. What is that chord change? Or I have to sight read something and kind of try to work out what works over what. And that's because it's some kind of thing that I haven't practiced and that my ears aren't used to, and thus I don't have the implicit knowledge of what it is I'm doing. I could explain, okay, if I had time, I sat down with a piece of music and I had the chord chart in front of me, I could explain everything that works over these chords, and then if I had to actually sight read the chords while I'm playing a solo, that wouldn't work, because I just have the explicit knowledge, not the implicit one, and that's where listening and practice basically comes in. So don't think about the theory. Number 7, which ties in a bit to last one, in a way, learn many different styles. Now, I don't care if it's Scottish Highland music, or if it's Indian Kanakal, or whatever. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't care what it is, but be open to loads of different types of music. If all you play is Iron Maiden, you can improvise till the cows come home and no one will give a toss. Because Iron Maiden have already done Iron Maiden. And the best way to come up with new ideas, basically somewhere I heard, I think it's every new idea is a combination of 2 or more old ideas. I don't know if it's entirely true, but I do know that a lot of new ideas are combinations of old ideas. And that's where musical diversity helps you progress and improvise more interesting solos. Now, just a kind of a silly example of this is, let's say I'm playing something like this. So this would be heavy metal, but Lydian heavy metal, which would be a happy kind of heavy metal, which in itself is an oxymoron. So let's say we had this type of thing. That, of course, isn't Lydian, but let's make it Lydian, so it could be... Would sound better on a guitar that it's in tune, but it'll do for the purposes of this demonstration. So that would be Lydian kind of metal, and you can do it on a down-tuned guitar to make it even more metal! So that you play, and you're improvising away, you're doing something like... And the wind is blowing your hair, and you're standing on top of the mountain, and the audience is wetting themselves in excitement over your guitar godlike skills. And how does that person have the imagination to combine metal with happiness, as in the Lydian mode? And how does that person do it? And then you do something even stranger. You play The Simpsons. Or something else. Now, my example doesn't mean that it's good. It could quite possibly mean that it's not good at all. But it's an example nonetheless. The idea is that you combine different things into something new, or something that at least not the same old stuff we've been hearing for ages and ages and ages. I could go on a rant here, but I won't. So, combine different things. And you can do that easier if you learn different types of music and you're open to different types of music. The opposite, when you just do one thing and you just socialize with people who do that same thing, is musical inbreeding. And we all know what happens with inbreeding. Okay, so number 8. I think I said that last one was number 7. Build it up. Let's say you're playing a solo and it's a 2-minute solo. You don't want to go in all guns blazing straight away. You can, of course. Sometimes it's actually a good idea to go in all guns blazing and maybe do the opposite thing, where you kind of slow down eventually and see if you can manage to keep up the intensity without keeping up the ferocity of it or whatever. But normally you try to build it up slowly because that works. Some of the methods that we've been using for ages are methods that we've been using for ages because for ages we've noticed that these methods work. Oh, yes, these methods work. Yeah, so build it up slowly. Don't chill out, man. And mix, you can do that by mixing techniques, maybe mixing scales or whatever, different styles, but yeah. It can be a difficult thing. If you have 4 bars of solo, that's a different thing entirely. Maybe you do want to just kind of, this is what I do in 4 bars, kind of like Yngwie would do. But on the other hand, maybe you want to do something like Steve Lukather in Rosanna, although I think that's more than 4 bars. But still. So, mix it up. That's number 8, and now we're down. Now we're down to number 9, and this one might just be one of the most important ones, which is transcribe. Transcribe other people's solos, at least as much as you can. Of course, you can learn them from tab, which is better than nothing, I would suppose, because learning stuff is very good for you. But if you actually transcribe it, you'll actually be doing a world of good to what is your main instrument, your most important, the most important bit of any musician, which is that musician's ears, or hearing, or musical ear. You'll be developing your musical ear when you transcribe, which means that you can easily, or at least it makes it easier for you to recognize which notes work over which things without having to know what note it is that you're playing or what that thing in the background is, what chord's going on. Why is that keyboard playing a sharp minor major 7 flat 5? What's a sharp minor major? I don't know. A sharp minor major something. Yeah, but you get the drift. So transcribing is great for you. Plus it saves money. You don't have to buy tab books. Oh wait, there's internet. You get everything for free. Except internet tab is often terrible. So do transcribe. Now these are some of the tips that work for me. Like I said, I have some of this stuff covered in my Guitar Academy, such as scales and licks and so on. You can find my Guitar Academy, there's a link in the description, but you can get access to it as well via Patreon, and it's a lot more affordable that way. Besides, if you decide that you hate it and you hate the music that you get from Patreon and the bunch of exclusives that you get from Patreon, you don't have to pay. Because, yeah, I don't want to force you to pay for something you hate. Yeah, so do check out my Patreon or just go to my Guitar Academy and check that out. If you have any more ideas on how to improve improvising, leave them in the comments. Other than that, if you want to check out more lessons here on YouTube, there's a playlist here somewhere. Click like, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification thing. Like I said, comment and check out my Patreon. There's a bunch of my music there, all of my music there actually. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in another one. Take care. Bye!